What's going on, guys? Jordan Richards here from Destination Devy. Follow me on Twitter at @YourBoyJRich. Like this video if you like it, if I provide good information for all you good people, and smash the subscribe button to check out all the great stuff on Mayo Media Network. Now, this week was a bit dreadful as far as I'm concerned. I had a really rough week in fantasy. I hope all of you guys had a great week. I hope some of you took my advice and picked up DJ Dallas on your waivers, because he had an excellent first week in his debut in the NFL, scoring 2 touchdowns. We saw the return of Jalen Reagor finally back to the Eagles lineup, where he saw a 72% snap share and a 22% target share. Great to see in his first game back for the Eagles. And there's still Travis Fulgham, who is on fire right now in fantasy. He's the first guy we're going to dive into because I haven't touched on him yet in this segment, and his dynasty stock is so difficult to talk about. Where does it go? How is he going to keep performing? Is he still the guy? One thing to note about Fulgham is he is the wide receiver 1 since week 4. That's right, the wide receiver 1, and he is leading the NFL in receiving yards since week 4. And that's not even really talking about him getting overly involved. That week 4 against San Francisco, he only saw 3 targets, caught 2 passes for 57 yards, and 1 touchdown. Since then, he's been a monster. He's been seeing 7+ targets in pretty much every single game. He's had a touchdown or 70 receptions in every single game, which is astounding for a player that basically had no dynasty value coming into the season. But the problem is how do we value a guy like that? And I think it's time we start recognizing his talent. He is really good. He is really good. And I was kind of a detractor at first because we see this a lot in Dynasty. Players have their weeks, they have their moments, and maybe I'm on the train a little bit too late, but this happens. This happens, and we have to admit our faults. We have to admit our defeats when we were wrong. I didn't want to believe in Fulgham right away. I think I was a bit quicker to believe in James Robinson than I was in Fulgham, and they are very similar scenarios, guys with unsure futures, but are producing at a very high level. And so from that, I need to apologize to Travis Fulgham and apologize to fantasy owners who maybe I told not to get Fulgham, but now it's time to start thinking about maybe he can be that Alshon Jeffrey kind of target for Carson Wentz in this Eagles offense. We know that Jalen Reagor is going to be there, their first round pick from this season, but outside of that, we don't really know what to expect. Miles Sanders is going to be there. We know that Dallas Goedert's going to be there, their number 1 tight end of the future. But Travis Fulgham may be that guy, and there may be a buying opportunity to still get him at a decent price. And that's because Alshon Jeffrey's probably still going to come back, and he's probably going to get more targets than he deserves, even though it should be more of an A.J. Green situation. We saw T. Higgins come in, and he totally took over for A.J. Green, took over that offense, is commanding those wide receiver 1 type targets, with Tyler Boyd taking a lot of targets out of the slot. But I think Fulgham could see a similar situation, and it may not be this year he gets that full role because, unfortunately, Jeffrey's still there in a very high cap hit, but he's been honestly exceptional, and it's hard to describe him as anything but that. He's been very, very good, and so his stock is going way up right now, and I do think he's someone we should be considering buying, even for potentially a 2nd, 3rd round pick if you can get him. It's going to be tough, though, because he's winning fantasy owners' weeks right now. Each and every week, he's a must-start every week. Like I said, his numbers, he's literally leading the league in receiving since week 4. He's the wide receiver 1 since week 4, and of course that accounts for bye weeks and things of that nature. But he's still wide receiver 6 in points per game, which who's not going to take that? That's a wide receiver 1. That's better than most of the guys we were drafting in the first round this year. And he's producing at a very, very high level, and we need to start to appreciate that a little bit more. And I think most people are on board now. It takes a few weeks. You want to see some consistency. But he's been very consistent, getting over 70 yards in pretty much every single game, or scoring a touchdown with a few games going over 100 yards and seeing double-digit targets. That's all you want to see. And while Jalen Reagor was involved a little bit more and Fulgham only saw 7 targets, that may still continue going forward. And there's no reason to kind of believe otherwise, unless Alshon Jeffrey comes back, in which case I would still consider buying up Fulgham because I think he's already shown that he can produce in this offense, and I don't see a reason why the Eagles would get rid of him, especially with how hard they've had it with wide receivers lately. So if I were you guys, I'd be looking to buy Travis Fulgham for the right price. If you're not contending, he could be an option you try and buy a little bit later, like close to the trade deadline as a piece, maybe trade a higher price asset for him. There's been a lot of injuries this year, so it's difficult to kind of navigate how good is Travis Fulgham relative to all these receivers with now Kenny Golladay is going down, Odell Beckham done for the year. There's a lot of talented receivers that aren't producing at the highest level, but Fulgham has 100% earned our respect as a fantasy community and as a talent in the NFL. The second guy I want to touch on is TJ Hawkinson, the tight end for the Detroit Lions, who has sneakily been very, very good this season. And I don't know why I feel like I haven't really noticed it. I have him on a couple of rosters, but he's been very consistent. He's had no less than 9 fantasy points in every single game this season. We can't say that for very many tight ends. And while it doesn't seem like a lot because his ceiling this season has only been 16 points, he's never really had a boom game, that's still tight end 4 in fantasy right now. That's still tight end 4 in points per game also. He's still ahead of Noah Fant, his teammate at Iowa, who everyone thinks is the better tight end. But TJ Hawkinson's kind of proving that he can still get it done. He's never seen less than 4 targets in any game this season. He's, like I said, he's still producing fantasy points, even though there's not the highest ceiling. He's never really catastrophically ruining your team with a big dud, a 0 performance. And he's a player that I think still has room to grow into this offense. Even though Marvin Jones has struggled and he's kind of getting it together now, he's going to be an option next year for the Lions. Marvin Jones probably will not come back for Detroit. Kenny Golladay is also going to be a free agent, so there is maybe the chance that maybe even he is gone, although I doubt it with how much success they've had. They probably find a way to bring him back, but Marvin Jones at his older age, he may be a guy they may let go of and say, you know what, we're going to let TJ Hawkinson grow into this offense and become a bigger part of it going forward. And now, like I said, he's doing very well. He's been good for fantasy. He just hasn't had a Robert Tonyan or a Tyler Higbee type of game. And we've seen now without those big games, those guys have been relatively decent, but not great. And TJ Hawkinson has been better than all of them when you take out that one big game. And yes, it's hard to take out one big game, but Hawkinson has been consistent. He's getting targets, he's getting yards, or he's getting touchdowns. And that's what you want to see from fantasy. Consistency may not look the best on paper, but when you see it in the overall ranks, that's why Travis Kelce's number 1. He's the most consistent tight end in fantasy, as well as being extremely talented and seeing a lot of volume. TJ Hawkinson is kind of just like a lighter version of that. He's very consistent so far, especially this season, and hopefully the volume, the touchdowns, the work will come in the future. Tight ends take 3 years to break out, and so because of that, it may just be a year that we have to wait for Hawkinson, and I would be trying to buy him up if I could. I do definitely think there is room to grow in this offense for TJ Hawkinson next season especially, and Dynasty owners need to get ahead of that right now before the trade deadlines and try and pick him up on a couple of rosters. Now, the last guy I want to talk about is kind of a favorite of mine. He's a cult hero. He's got his own fan club, and it's Corey Davis. Corey Davis, the massive bust out of Western Michigan, the receiver that was supposed to be the next greatest thing, the next big wide receiver. He was drafted so high, ahead of Mike Williams, ahead of all these other extremely talented wide receivers, unfortunately, and he just hasn't been able to get it done in Tennessee. But like many people have pointed out already, he's wide receiver 14 in PPR right now, and that's over his only 5 games. So for all players who have played over 5 games, he's wide receiver 14. Then there's the anomalies like the Allen Lazard, who's very high in points per game while only playing 3 games, and Jamison Crowder, who's only played in 4 games. But the players who played in 5 games, Corey Davis is wide receiver 14. I know, that's crazy, right? How is Corey Davis wide receiver 14 in PPR? And it's because he's been really good. He's been getting a lot of volume. And for some people, unfortunately, it's come at the expense of Jonnu Smith. I was looking at their splits today on FTN Fantasy. Go check out FTN Fantasy for all your fantasy content. They have a great splits tool, and I'll show his splits here on this video to kind of show you guys why he's been so good. And when you compare them with Jonnu Smith's splits and how they relate to A.J. Brown. Because I think that A.J. Brown is the key here for Corey Davis. We all thought Corey Davis could be that dominant alpha wide receiver, and we learned quickly he can't. He doesn't have that ability. He can't command top coverage. He isn't good enough to get open when he's the focal point of that offense. In comes A.J. Brown, the true alpha dog in that offense, the one who commands all that work and that top coverage while still producing, is wide receiver 7 in points per game. So Ryan Tannehill is basically supporting 2 fringe wide receiver 1s right now in points per game because that play action game is deadly with Derrick Henry sucking in the defense on all those run plays. It forces teams to really focus in on that run game and allows players like A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith to thrive in that offense. Corey Davis has really taken advantage of that this year, and you see his splits with A.J. Brown. He is significantly better with A.J. Brown in the lineup than he is without A.J. Brown. Jonnu Smith, conversely, is significantly worse with A.J. Brown in the lineup. now. And I think that's kind of the reason why people are upset with Jonnu Smith right now, because Jonnu Smith is supposed to be that tight end. He's supposed to be that second option. But no matter what's happened, Corey Davis has been the second option in that offense, whether it's Jonnu Smith as the primary guy or A.J. Brown. And now that A.J. Brown is back, it's allowing Corey Davis to thrive with secondary coverage and showing off that talent that we all saw in college. He's just maybe not that feature guy. Maybe he can be more of a Cooper Kupp, a Tyler Boyd. And I don't want to be crazy. But he could be what we all thought Robert Woods wasn't. Robert Woods was beside Sammy Watkins for years, and he was fine. Buffalo was an okay team. They didn't throw the ball a lot. He wasn't really able to unlock that potential. Now we're seeing that in Corey Davis. He's not the primary option, but maybe he doesn't have to be. Maybe he can still find success as a secondary slot or just secondary receiver option, and he can slowly work to be that fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, like we see out of Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. It's just going to be a matter of volume. And if A.J. Brown is healthy, Corey Davis is going to produce. And while it's a small sample, 3 games in, 2 games out, it's still very encouraging. And the splits are that wide. Like, we're talking about 8, 9 fantasy points per game that Corey Davis is doing with A.J. Brown in the lineup versus out of the lineup. Those are very important to know. Because when a player is producing at that level, you need to take note of that. And it's one of the reasons why Jonnu Smith may never be as good as we hope he could be, because A.J. Brown and Corey Davis are taking all of his targets that he was getting when A.J. Brown wasn't in the lineup. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you like it, please drop it a like down below. Drop a comment if you feel like there's some players I haven't touched on recently that you want me to talk about or that you want your thoughts on. I'll be in the comments answering some questions. Of course, subscribe to Mayo Media Network for even more great content. Follow me on Twitter at @YourBoyJRich for even more content, because I've been posting some of the stuff I've been finding recently on Twitter, so make sure you give me a follow. And that's it. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.